Just heard Daniel talk about the latest on the Israeli-Hamas war. Let's keep that conversation going with Carolyn Glick. She's a former senior foreign policy advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu. Welcome back to First Edition.
Oh, thanks so much for having me back on your program, guys.
Always great to have you. So as you just heard from Daniel's report, we're following the rescue of the 4 Israeli hostages who were brought back safely to Israel following a daring ground operation by IDF troops. Your reaction to this heroic mission?
Well, this was really just a morale booster for the people of Israel. It's an incredible morale booster. It reminds us of who we are and what we're fighting for and of why we must win. And as Daniel said, they were being held in a heavily populated civilian neighborhood. And it wasn't just that one family, the Abdallah family, that was holding the 3 male hostages. There was another very wealthy Gazan family that was holding Noah Argamani in their apartment 200 meters away. She has testified that she was forced by them to be their house cleaner. She was essentially their housemaid. And they barged into her room anytime they wanted to tell her to clean this, to clean that. They also were forced to read Quranic verses and faced Islamic brainwashing, according to one of the male hostages and another female hostage who was released in the November hostage for terrorist release. So, you know, these people are subjected to physical and mental torture throughout their 8 months in captivity. And it's a wild thing that after we exposed who it was that was holding them, and we saw that all of the neighbors around them were complicit with this, they knew it, and then they shot at the IDF forces who were evacuating them with RPGs, with Kalashnikovs. It's as if there is nobody in Hamas, in Gaza, that is a Hamas terrorist. Everybody is an innocent civilian, including people who are holding hostages. And Israelis look at what happened and realize 2 things. One is the imperative of carrying out this battle to total victory, because it's a zero-sum game between us and a people hell-bent as a society to annihilate us. And 2, we can't expect any assistance from the outside world, which, for whatever reason, has decided, shockingly and in a deranged manner, to side with Hamas against us. This incredible mission and its incredible success was just a very, very important reminder of who we are and what the stakes are in this war. It was very important.
Yes, we know that Israel has been and continues to be resilient, and it's executing its mission to make sure that it wipes out terrorists and actually retrieves all hostages. Do you think Hamas will eventually yield the remaining hostages, or Israel will have to continue to seek out and rescue the remaining hostages?
Hamas hasn't changed its position on hostage negotiations one iota since October 7th. They want Israel to collapse. They say that any deal is predicated first on an Israeli surrender, Israeli end of all of its mission in Gaza permanently, withdrawal of all IDF forces from Gaza permanently. That's been their position since October 7th, when they carried out this unprecedented massacre, this one-day genocide in Israel. And it's never changed. So when you look at their position from round of negotiation to round of negotiation, what you see is always the same. For our hostages, they're requiring our surrender, our strategic defeat in this war, and their retention of power in Gaza completely. That's what they want. And so no, again, nobody likes to admit it. Everybody wants to believe that there's some deal at the end of, there's a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. There's no pot of gold and there's no rainbow. This is a war that we are fighting against a genocidal enemy that has openly acted and, of course, seeks, in their constitution, the annihilation of every Jew on earth. And we can't make compromises with them. They don't want to make a deal with us. They believe in what they're doing, and they will follow through forever until they either are destroyed or successful.
And Unfortunately, the media in the United States has been siding with Hamas, even in terms of the verbiage. We pointed out CNN specifically called it a release versus a rescue, as well as Jake Sullivan also refused to tell CNN if, you were citing if he feels comfortable with Israel's rescue mission. I mean, can you talk a bit about the United States response and the overall propaganda that is being promoted in the mainstream media?
So I think that the problem is that under the Biden administration, you see an uneasiness at best with the idea that Israel is a normal state and has a right to self-defense. Any state whose citizens are being held captive, has the requirement, has the obligation as a sovereign state to do everything to rescue them. That's what the purpose of a common defense pact is, which is a state, which is a nation state. And so Israel obviously has the obligation to rescue all of our hostages being held by Hamas. And yet what you hear very clearly in Sullivan's statement is that they don't think that that's true, that either we don't have the obligation or we don't have the right to fulfill that obligation without American permission, which means that they don't believe that we have a right to self-defense, which means that they don't consider us a sovereign state. And that's an extraordinary position for the United States of America to be taking towards the state of Israel. But that is clearly the position that he was expressing in that CNN interview, because the United States cannot, you can't think of any state that the United States would look to the way that they're looking at Israel, that that there's a question about whether we have the right to fulfill our basic obligation to all of our citizens, which is to rescue them when they've been seized because they're Israelis by a terrorist organization that is bent on our destruction. Of course we have that obligation. So questioning Israel's right to fulfill that obligation is questioning Israel's right to exist.
It was a joyous weekend, and we continue to celebrate the return of the hostages. However, something is very puzzling to me, Carolyn. Benny Gantz, he's a centrist minister. He decided to resign. Why do you think that he did that? We do know that he has an ongoing issue in discrepancy with Prime Minister Netanyahu with regard to the lack of transparency concerning a post-war Gaza, what that would look like. Is there any other reason why he would resign at such a pivotal time?
I think two things. One is that his positions are entirely aligned with the Biden administration. The Biden administration, like Benny Gantz, have been demanding from the outset of this war that Prime Minister Netanyahu set out his position for the day after Gaza. And the problem is that Prime Minister Netanyahu's position for the day after Gaza, just like the position of the vast majority of Israelis, is not aligned with the American position, because as we see, as President Biden set out last Friday night when he presented as Israel's, incorrectly, but as Israel's offer for a ceasefire with Hamas, he said that the U.S. policy is to end the war as quickly as possible, whether or not Hamas is out of power, and of course it won't be. And then he wants to use that ceasefire to pave the way for the establishment of a Palestinian state. You have 80% of Israelis who oppose the establishment of a Palestinian state, and Prime Minister Netanyahu is one of them. So if Netanyahu comes out and says, my view of the day after is for Israel to control Gaza militarily for the foreseeable future, because it's the only way for us to secure our future. And we need a perimeter of 1 to 3 kilometers going from west to east across Gaza to prevent them from nearing the border with Israel, and that we have to cut Gaza into zones so that they're not going to be able to organize to butcher our children again, then the United States is going to say absolutely not, and they're going to open a breach with Israel, because what they want us to do is to let things go back to the way they were on October 7th, and we can't. So the reason why Netanyahu keeps saying we have to first defeat Hamas before we can talk about the day after is because it's true. The United States' day after scenario is predicated on Israel not achieving our war goal of defeating Hamas, and Israel's day after scenario is very much predicated on us reaching our goals. So Benny Gantz from the outset has been saying, no, you have to talk about what kind of Palestinian authority you want to be governing Gaza. And the answer is we really don't know. First, we have to defeat the one that's there, and then we can figure out how we organize with the Palestinians going forward. So this was a position that's very aligned with the Biden administration's position, and it's not surprising that Benny Gantz left at this time, because the Biden administration is pushing forward very forthrightly to do what it wants to do, regardless of the position of the Israelis. And we expect for Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, when he comes here this afternoon, to start really issuing orders to Israel that you have to stand down or else. And in the meantime, you're going to have shock forces who claim to be aligned with the White House of the left that are going to be laying siege on the Knesset starting towards the end of this week and going forward with the goal of overthrowing the government of Israel.
Carolyn, pivoting a little bit here, let's talk about the Jewish holiday. Can you tell us about Shavuot?
Shavuot, yes. So the Jewish holiday of Shavuot is one of 3 pilgrimage holidays that are commanded to the Jewish people to uphold in the Bible. And it is a holiday that serves a dual purpose. One is that it's the end of a period of waiting between receiving the 10 Commandments and the receiving of the Torah in the Sinai during the wanderings of the children of Israel after the Exodus from Egypt. So it's a holiday that celebrates the receipt of the Torah. And as we're taught by our sages, the Torah is the thing that keeps us free of tyranny on this land, that we don't accept dictators because we understand there's only one supreme leader, and that's God. And the other thing that it is that it's a celebration of the first harvest of the year of wheat in the land of Israel. So it's a holiday that brings together both Jewish faith and Jewish nationalism, Jewish attachment to the land of Israel. And so it's all sectors of Israeli society have long viewed this as one of the most joyous holidays, whether it's because they support agriculture and celebrating the fruitfulness of the land of Israel, or whether it's because they're religious and they celebrate the law of God that we've been commanded to keep since the time of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so it's a very, very joyous occasion. We celebrate by eating dairy products, because you're not allowed to eat meat until you get the Torah, and by doing a lot of study and a lot of just fun celebration with family. So I haven't gone shopping yet. I haven't figured out what I'm making yet, but I'm sure that we're going to have a lot of fun in our family as well.
Awesome, awesome. Sounds like a great time of faith, feast, and family, all acknowledging the love and compassion under the Heavenly Father. Thank you, Carolyn. We appreciate you joining First Edition.
Thank you very much.
More First Edition.